Hi, everybody. We're just going to wait a few moments for people to get cups of tea and settle in before we start. So I'm just going to give it 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Thanks. Okay, wonderful. Let's get going. Okay, hi, everybody, and welcome to today's discussion on content at scale, how leading brands are reshaping their marketing models to keep up with demand. I'm Anil Noorani. I'm the managing partner at TKM Consultants, and we'll be leading the first part of today's session. Firstly, thank you to everyone who's joining us for today's event. We have a very exciting hour ahead of us. A little bit of housekeeping. We are recording the session, which will be available to you after the event. And of course, we'd love to hear from you during the event also. There's a question and answer button that you can click. So please drop any questions, ideas, thoughts into the chat, and they can be answered during the panel discussion, or if time gets away from us, after the event. A huge thank you to the event sponsors, Amnet, who are part of the Energy Group and leaders in Smartshoring. I've had an opportunity to work closely with Amnet, who are always looking to uncover new insights, understand trends in the world of marketing and content, and ultimately progress the conversation in those areas most affecting our industry. This particular topic, managing content at scale, while also managing costs, of course, is one that I think all businesses are wrestling with. Many companies are clearly accelerating their digital first strategy, and I had a look at some recent stats around this topic that I thought may be of interest. So there are now over 1 billion active users on Instagram, with 72% of Instagram users claiming to have made a product purchase after seeing it on an app. There are 800 million active users on TikTok, with many brands developing their TikTok marketing strategy as we speak. 68 million people are using augmented reality every month in the US as consumers virtually try before they buy. And unsurprisingly, 43 of us are now spending more time on social during COVID. With personalization, dynamic content, and custom content at the top of most CMOs' agendas, this is becoming increasingly challenging as the number of social media sites increases every week, with hundreds of platforms and multiple agency models. 72% of corporations now have an in-house agency model, according to the In-House Agency Forum, and 64% of agencies are looking to offshore more in the next 12 months. So this is a huge and very timely topic for us to tackle. We have some wonderful speakers with us today to help us navigate the content at scale challenge. In terms of order, we're going to kick off with a one-to-one conversation with David Bevis, the Global Client Services Director at Oliver, the leading in-house agency who have successfully developed the Better Inside philosophy. We'll then be passing over to David Pritchard, Global Commercial Director at Amnet, who will walk us through the evolution of offshoring and the emergence of the Smartshoring model. I'll then be handing over to Laura Ficchetti, the Global Lead for Marketing Sourcing at the WFA, to moderate a panel discussion on creating content at scale. We're very excited to say the panel consists of Ezio Saponari, Global Sourcing Manager at Danone, Nikki Russell, Partner at WDC London, and Rami El-Sadani, Head of Video at Barclays in-house studio. So a huge thank you to all our speakers. So perhaps we should get started. So David Bevis, if you could turn your camera on, show your camera and your audio, that'd be great. David, hi. David Bevis from Oliver. Great to have you with us today. And perhaps you could start with providing us with a little bit of background into your own experience. And as Oliver have been instrumental, of course, in transforming content models for many brands around the world, perhaps we could start by exploring, why do you think so many brands are considering bringing creative services in-house in order to facilitate content at scale?
Right. Well, thanks, Anil. And it's an absolute pleasure to be part of this event and to take part in this interesting and ever-evolving discussion. So, yeah, quick intro and background. I'm David Bevis, Client Services Director at Oliver Agency. I've spent my whole career in creative services, started agency side working in a number of different creative roles before moving into some client side positions to help sort of build, shape and lead global in-house creative services for global brands, which then led me to Oliver, which is arguably the world's leading agency that focuses purely on building bespoke agencies for brands. So that's a bit about me and my background. I guess to answer your first question around sort of the increase in the rise of in-housing to meet the demands of managing content at scale. And I think that's come about for many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is consumers have the ability to engage a huge amount of content. The technology that has created an explosion of channels and content over recent years. So that's kind of forced brands to have a look at the models that they've got in place to be able to respond to that demand. One of those models which has been proven to provide increased cost efficiency, but also more importantly, agility. And never more important this year with COVID, to have models in place where brands can pivot quickly to cope with those changes in the market. As you said, there's 72% of large multinational organisations are already on the journey to in-housing. And there was a recent study taken and released by the WFA, which said that 57% of multinational organisations already have an in-house capability, whether that's sort of creative digital production services. There's another 17% that are considering. So that makes 75% of large multinational enterprise businesses that are already on the journey. And interestingly, that report also shows that many of those organisations started within the last 5 years. So there's been a considerable increase over the recent years, and I think that part of that is initially, I think it was around cost saving, looking at ways of releasing budget, because with that explosion of technology, often brands' budgets didn't follow in the same fashion. They obviously had to make their budgets go further. They were looking at ways to look at efficiencies to release budget to invest in other forms of engaging their customers and creating content at scale.
David, just on that point, do you think is the in-house model more suitable for a particular type of organisation, a particular type of brand? Thinking about that additional 17% that's starting to engage with their in-house model, is it more suited to, like we've obviously, got a variety of financial services and FMCG on the call, on the webinar today, more suitable for a particular type of organisation than another, or is it across the board?
I would say it's open across the board. And I think we would say, that the rise of in-housing, it's been a trend that's been on the rise, but it's probably now becoming more and more a mainstream model going forward, and should be part of every brand's marketing ecosystem to look at ways of unlocking, the cost efficiencies, but also there's, close proximity to the brand, to the culture and the fit of a particular business. Really understanding that that brand's audience and the communities that they're looking to engage and serve. So really looking for agility in the way of optimizing content at scale is.
I was going to say, so in terms of what are the challenges when organizations do embark on this journey? Because obviously there's clearly some huge positives here around cost efficiency. Culture clearly is one, being close to the brand immersion for organizations. In terms of some of the challenges, both on the agency side for companies like Oliver, but also for the brands themselves, what have you experienced in your many years of experience?
Well, I think one of the main things to point out, I guess, is, in-housing is a mindset and it's a commitment. And whether a brand is looking to do that themselves, and many brands have done it quite successfully, or whether they're looking to outsource to a specialist partner like Oliver, either way, the principles stay the same. It's about building the right model around people, process, and technology. So having a mindset to be able to create the right environment for creativity to thrive, having the right blend of on-site, near-site, and offshore. And it's about building a bespoke model for each company. So I don't think there's any company that is a particular company to suit in-house. And I think it can take many different shapes and sizes for whatever's right for that particular brand.
Okay. So you mentioned people, process and technology there. So in terms of, obviously when you're developing or managing and publishing content at scale, technology must play a super important part in that. So what sort of technology platforms do clients, should they be aware of that are available to them to deliver, I don't know, greater automation, for example?
Well, yeah, technology is hugely important, and it's probably the backbone of any in-house capability looking to create content at scale. Making sure you can connect all of your teams and your customers and the whole workflow and end to end. And within Oliver, we have our own proprietary software which we've invested in, which from everything from initial briefing right through to final execution and everything in between. There's an increased focus on automation as well, looking at the efficiencies around tech that can create content faster. So when you have the right blend of people, process and technology, you're looking to unlock and create content that you can produce faster than ever before, that works harder and better than ever before, and also then achieves some cost efficiencies. So technology is a crucial part of the mix. Equally are the processes that you need to have in place. And as I was mentioning earlier, about having the right mindset, you need to have people engaged on both sides, as key sponsors. So if you're looking within a client's organization and they've got someone within marketing and someone in procurement that really embraces that change and that transformation that a business needs to go through to really unlock those advantages that an in-house model can create. And it's not always about being on site either. I think a lot of people in the past have assumed that in-house means on site. It's great to be on site. It's great to have that close proximity, not taking anything away from that. That is kind of an important part of the model. However, this year's also showed that it doesn't have to always be on site. It can also mean that you can work from anywhere and be connected. And when you've got the right technology and processes in place, that agility to be able to pivot to the market changes that we've certainly seen this year are really important and crucial to any business model looking to create content in a way where you can create it better and faster, but it's more about being on the inside, for us at least, being on the inside of a client's world and a client's business. You really understand the culture, the brand, the people, the audience. You can react much faster to some of the demands within the market.
Excellent. So just staying on the technology theme for a moment, but as opposed to the actual operational technology that you're familiar with in terms of Oliver's solutions, what about the actual content itself? So, we talked about social challenges around social content, but then there's also things like augmented reality, mixed reality, immersive experience, that type of service, the content that enables that type of experience. I mean, how suitable is an in-house model to overcome that sort of area of spend that, again, we're seeing quite an upward trajectory around that over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think it's hugely important. And as we sort of head into next year, the trends that were there before COVID have only accelerated during and will continue with that same momentum as we go into next year. And I think some of those three areas that you've just touched on, looking at how to use data more effectively, using insights to optimize content to drive more personalized experiences. Augmented reality, I mean, it's an area that I personally really enjoy, that sort of intersection between creativity and technology. There's a whole area of innovation to explore, and for us, being part of You and Mr. Jones also brings a whole load of tech that we can take to our clients. And I think AR, VR, mixed reality, and the whole cross-reality technology that is only going to accelerate. I think the big tech giants have been investing in smartphones and devices, so over the next 3 to 5 years. I saw a stat recently that said that there'll be 1.5 billion smartphone 5G enabled users. So those that are poised to take advantage of that audience and that growth. And also e-commerce and social, as you mentioned. I mean, this year we've seen a huge shift and focus on e-commerce. Many of our clients have reshaped some of the teams specifically around the increase of traffic that we've seen move to online, partly because of COVID, but also that's not going to slow down going into next year.
I mean, that must be a massive benefit, actually, the direct-to-consumer model taking off in the way that it has done, having those data and econometrics capabilities in-house coupled with your creative disciplines. So the bringing together of those two environments, I suppose, is almost why in-housing sort of has emerged. It's almost to facilitate that digital first requirement. I mean, just going back to the modeling then, so, what are the different pieces of the puzzle, in terms of in-housing, outsourcing, offshoring, nearshoring, how do all these different facets work effectively?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and there's no one size fits all. I think having the right blend of on-site, near-site, and offshore is really important, and that's something that we'll look at. And I think before COVID kicked off, we were already reshaping some of our teams, to only have the roles at close proximity to the client you really need, and then looking to optimize global production. So I think the building blocks of people, process, technology will always be there. They're the bedrock of a in-house capability. But actually, I think all capabilities and services that we're building will constantly evolve, and it's part of that partnership that we look to form to make sure that we can evolve to clients' requirements and the changes in the marketplace.
Okay, so just in the last couple of minutes, time just goes too quickly, right? I wish I had an hour just with you. But in terms of looking to the future, to 2021, where do you see the biggest area of investment for companies like Oliver, for the brands that you work with? Where do you see the money going, basically?
Well, I'm bound to say, looking at the whole sort of end-to-end ecosystem and where in-housing fits for brands, and that doesn't mean that it's in-house, or it can be, having the right sort of mix of suppliers and partners. And we work very closely with a lot of agencies, lead creative agency that might come up with the big brand idea, and then we'll look to sort of execute that in the most sort of cost efficient and effective way. Equally, you can do the full end-to-end. But I think from an investment side, it will be looking to improve agility. I think this year has proved to many brands that those that have invested in models that enable them to pivot quickly to changes in the marketplace are well equipped. And also, releasing budget to invest in new innovation, as we just mentioned, around automation, being able to optimize content at scale by using technology to really look at being able to create content fast, that works harder and can be deployed in the most efficient and effective way.
Absolutely. Okay, and my last question for you, Dave, is so what's this, if I'm thinking about in-housing today, what's the single biggest benefit for me as a brand owner, as a marketing director, as a CMO? What's the one thing that you want me to take away from today's conversation?
Well, I'd probably say that there's been a lot of talk around this, the trends of in-housing, and I'll probably say we're at a stage now where it's, is it a trend, or is it fast becoming a mainstream model? And therefore, every brand should be looking at having an in-house creative services, digital production as part of their marketing ecosystem. So, release a whole load of benefits around, like we said, proximity, agility, cost savings, but being able to create content that is more meaningful and relevant to their consumers.
Excellent. I knew there'd be more than one benefit, but okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, David Burris. That's wonderful, insight. And I don't know if there's any questions, but if there are, obviously, we'll make sure we follow up with you after the event and get any answers back to the participants and the individuals that are watching today. But that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Much appreciated. Okay, so moving on, we are now going to hear from David Pritchard, who's going to talk about the evolution of offshoring creative production. So David, if you want to share your camera. Okay, wonderful. We've got David.
I'm so happy that you spoke about technology passionately, David, as I'm trying to try and share my screen now without the internet dropping.
Okay.
Let's see what happens there. So guys, I'm actually just going to do a quick check. Make sure that you can see the
I'll wait for you to do that, David, before I stop my video. Excellent. Oh,
Hopefully everyone can
excellent.
see
Yeah,
it.
that you're in. Okay, I'll stop my video and off you go.
Okay. So do we have a full screen?
Yes, go for it.
Excellent. Superb. Well, Anil, thank you so much. And for your earlier introduction of wonderful speaker, that's rare I get called that. So I'm already feeling relatively buoyant. But thanks to Dave and Anil for a great start. That's going to be a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best not to let the team down. And thanks to everybody that's actually on this event as well. I know time's precious, so an hour out of your diary is much appreciated. I'm David Pritchard, as already said, and the Group Commercial Director at Amnet. Really proud that we're actually sponsoring this event as well. I've only been given 10 minutes, and I've already started to eat into that allotted time already. So what I will be doing is just giving you a 7 or 8 minutes discussing a word that's being used more and more in the industry, and perhaps a word that many of you are becoming more familiar with, Smartshoring. But what is it? You know, where has it come from? Now in this deck, there is going to be some detail. If I don't cover it all, forgive me, but I believe that you've got access to the presentation after. So I'm sure you can download it or review the video recording and view it at your own leisure. But let's get going with Smartshoring. What is it? Where's it come from? So Smartshoring, in short, is an evolvement of offshoring. And we'll explore this a little bit more in a bit more detail later on. You know, offshoring is not new. It's been around for 2 decades, and I'm sure many of you here on this call today have engaged or are currently engaged with an offshore service of some shape or form. It became prominent really in the early 2000s and quickly became an important player in many a global strategy to meet growing market demands. Fairly or unfairly, and I'll let you guys decide on that one, it's had negative connotations attached, but it is fast diminishing. The last 5 years, I would say in particular, is true of this, as we've seen it mature on a really quite significant level. Business intelligence, business practice, and global awareness have all contributed to this. In fact, you know, I'll give you a real live example. You know, disaster recovery and business continuity are also 2 prominent factors that have come to light, really shown their strengths in recent years. They become ever more important and they continue to excel. I'll give you a real life scenario right now. Just when we thought 2020 wasn't going to give us any more of a negatively or at its worst, right now, as we're on this call, India is preparing itself for a cyclone. It could hit them for a couple of days. The hearts of the individuals and the inherent desire to delight the customer, that will go some way, but it will be the robust business planning and the practices that will ensure business as usual. And that has been what has been very prominent over the last few years. Other key drivers include a digital first approach, and that's industry wide, and a shift towards working virtually. Businesses are undoubtedly putting more focus and reliance on automation and technology and looking to offshore models to satisfy resource support. Businesses across the board are aware of the commercial value leveraging offshore resource can deliver, and further the ability to produce content at scale faster and globally. Confidence levels have massively risen in recent years. Take Deloitte's stance. You know, they acknowledge progression and believe that offshoring has become and will remain a strategic imperative. Just look at the stat to the left. You know, if I read that out to you, according to Deloitte, companies using offshore pre-media service are reporting fewer concerns with supplier proactivity, innovation, responsiveness, resource quality, and service quality. For many of you that may have had experience of offshore from years gone by, those were the initial issues that people had with an offshore practice, the initial concerns. They've now been started to be put to bed. And other statistics noted on here are also favourable towards the offshoring model as well. Notably, this data was collated and published in an industry insight pre-COVID. We believe the reliance on offshoring is only going to grow post-COVID, whenever that's going to be. So let's move on to Smartshoring, the next phase in your offshoring journey. So offshoring, we all know the benefits of a traditional offshore model, what it can bring. However, let's refresh ourselves on what these are. So there's a list there. Not surprisingly, another statistic that the industry reports about out was that 48% of all the respondees, of which there were many, said that access to low-cost resource was their #1 reason to offshore. But what I want to drive is that there's so many other reasons to, so many more benefits that the offshore model supply you with, whether it's scalability, whether it's flexibility, whether it's 24/7 support on a global scale. There are more listed, and the copy of this presentation, as I've already said, will be available to you following the event. So where's Smartshoring come from then? What is it? Smartshoring really shifts offshoring up a gear or two, and it adds to the benefits that offshoring already give. It's a more contemporary, progressive, more relevant form of offshoring. It's more intuitive. It thinks on a global level, and more importantly, is risk aware. Importantly, it's a partnership. It's not a transactional model or pure transactional model. It's all around partnership. It's not restrictive, and it considers multiple hubs in multiple locations, giving access to a greater range of skill sets. And there's one point I will highlight in particular. I've been doing this now for over 16 years, and I would say that my experience has confirmed for me that point number 4 on there is that a hybrid model of offshore production and in-country client services is absolutely essential. And this is what Smartshoring delivers as a baseline or as a pillar of its offering. It can ensure that ways of thinking are aligned. It can ensure that approaches are adapted. It can ensure that communication and quality are heightened, but it's closer relationships as well that are formed. And I hope that most would agree, chemistry is a key component to any success. But where does Smartshoring fit? It is about understanding the sweet spot. Where does it really come into its own? The diagram you now see on the screen lists a host of services, activities, typically within an agency or in-house studio. It's only illustrative, and I'm sure that I've missed many out, but for the purpose of this presentation, it serves its purpose. The bottom left quadrant is what sits with the agency or the in-house studio. If you like, in short, the creative, the strategy, setting the rules. The top right quadrant is prime for Smartshoring. That's what's ideal for Smartshoring. That's where we're following the rules en masse. It's repeat, it's template driven work, it's mechanical production. Automation, obviously key in this as well. Dave has spoken so eloquently already about automation. It's imperative that the Smartshoring setups, your Smartshoring partners also align with automation. But if we talk about some of that work that's mechanical, it could be, for instance, packaging. We could be looking at agencies or in-house studios producing the master artworks, offshore studios producing rollouts. If we're looking at video post-production, it could be simply looking at reversioning. But I think you're starting to get the idea as to where this fits. And this is where costs can be driven out. It's where profits can be increased and reinvestment into your business is made possible. The all-important question is, how do you find a balance? Today's event concentrates on reshaping marketing models to deliver content at scale. We believe, though, we see there have been 3 main players or categories. The first being the agency studios, second being the in-house, and the third being the offshore. Agency may sit on site in-house as well. But there's a place for us all. I think that's what's important to say here. There is a place for us all. A combination can always be found to fit need, and each player has an important part to play. Commercial savings can be attractive, but especially if you look at a combination of the in-house and the offshore. There's a bigger picture, however, to consider. Versatility provides options, and the mix can be dynamite, as I've written on here, offering multiple solutions to often complex and demanding challenges. Options are also important. The combination provides accelerated growth, it drives your profit, and it also gives faster delivery and higher output levels. In short, it delivers content on scale or at scale. I did promise you I wasn't going to go on for too long, so I'll stick to my promise. I'll stay true to my word. I've almost exhausted my allotted time, but hopefully not the audience. I will leave you with this. If Smartshoring is something you're considering, then there's some key steps to take. First and foremost, you've got to plan, you've got to lay the foundations, you've got to know what you need to outsource or what you want to outsource, what's right for your business. Secondly, you need to select the right partner and model. Infrastructure is important, but as I've already indicated, so is chemistry. 3, you've really got to define the ROI and what success looks like. And I can't put enough importance on metrics between partners within the model. And then 4thly, it's building the relationship and effective onboarding process, ways of working. This is really what's going to pave the way for a successful future. And that is an overview, a quick snapshot of Smartshoring. Anil, over to you.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. Can I ask you just to stop sharing your screen? That's wonderful. Okay. Yeah, fascinating. I mean, we're seeing, you know, as a consultancy working in the marketing fraternity, we're seeing the move to offshoring and smartshoring again just massively gather momentum. It's a mature industry. It's been around for 20 years now, and interestingly, we did a piece with the WFA a few months ago on this particular topic, how the offshoring market is developing for creative production, and it's something I think a lot of brands and procurement teams in particular are getting their arms around now as to how it can work for them specifically. And as David rightly said, you know, it's not one size fits all. It's a combination. It's about finding the balance, I suppose, between offshore, in-house, and obviously your agency, and working out which services are best suited to which particular discipline. So on that note, I'm now going to hand over to Laura Facchetti, who's going to be moderating the panel discussion with our wonderful speakers on content at scale. So Laura, always a pleasure. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anil. And I'm always impressed to see you standing up while presenting.
It's all I know, Laura. It's all I know.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you to you, Anil, and thank you to Entourage and Amnet for giving us the opportunity to share on that very important topic. Well, this isn't breaking news, and Dave, you provided already some insights around that, but COVID-19 is perhaps the biggest catalyst for industry change since the arrival of the internet. And as most of you in the call right now must be experiencing it, in these crazy times, leading marketers are tasked with finding more agile ways of working while demonstrating an increase in effective business outcomes. And as such, we see a lot of companies currently looking at reshaping their content agency models to create more content faster and often with less budget. I personally think that was already the case before the pandemic, but the pandemic has just accelerated all of that. And hence the headlines of this session, the race for agility. So the overall question we will try to answer is the following. So how do I create the right content at scale for the right cost? And I'd like to introduce my great panel today. So if you'd be happy to turn your, I think Nikki, you're not going to be able to, but Rami and Ezio, if you'd be happy to turn your camera on. So, hey, so we have the chance to be with, so Rami, head of video creative studio at Barclays UK, Ezio, global category manager advertising at Danone. And last but not least, Nikki, partner at WDC. And WDC was formerly known as White Door and is an operational change consultancy for marketeers and in-house agency leaders. And I'm Laura from the WFA, World Federation of Advertisers. So WFA is a global not-for-profit organization, and we help our members across the globe deliver better marketing. And I actually saw some of our members in the attendees list. So hi, Susan, if you're still listening to us, thank you for joining. Right, so I have a series of questions for my panel. They're grouped as the following. So we'll have a look at the current context and models in place. The second one, collaborations between in-house and outsourced partners. Third, the key challenges and watch-outs to share. 4, looking at the future, and we'll discuss the evolution of marketing models. And then 5, just very quickly, just some advice that the panelists would like to share with you. Right, so we have 25 minutes. It's a big topic, let's just get onto it. So Ezio, I'd like to start with you. So at Danone, how to deal with the constant demand for content while at the same time managing costs, and what are the mix of marketing delivery models that Danone or you employ, and what drivers helped you decide which mix was best for your company needs? I'm sure you could spend an hour on it, but if you could just tell us the headlines. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I will try to be quick. No, I mean, the first assumption was being honest with ourselves and asking ourselves the right question, right? So are we producing enough? Because quantity is as much as important as quality right now. And the second question was, which kind of content we have to produce more, right? So what do you want to do? If you want to produce more hero content and personalize that and then play with music as well and so on, or we want to start from the social part? So we decided to take in 2 steps. The first one was, yes, we need more quantity. We need far, far more quantity. So how we tackle this? And the second was, all right, we want more social content, mainly, mostly more than TVC, for instance, right? So that was the beginning of the journey. So that was the initial question that we had. In order to do this, we decided to kind of split the world into 2 parts. Hero content from one side, where the creative is still as playing a relevant role there, much more than when you produce social one, and the tier 2/tier 3. And in this case, we decided that the best option for us was to work with an in-housing company in order to scale up this world. So the right mix, it doesn't really exist. The right mix is depending on where your company is starting from and where it wants to go. Now, so this is the journey that you have to take. So the first thing first is to assess internally where you are, where you want to go, and what you want to reach at the end. Personalization at scale, it will become the natural evolution of this, because it's going to be, and it is already, a must-have. And this is the background or the base that we are creating in order to finally boost personalization at scale, from digital to potentially expanding to addressable TV and so on.
Thanks so much, Ezio. I like the pragmatic approach and just asking yourself, what's the type of content we need to produce more fast? It's a really good question. Rami, thank you. Rami, what about you at Barclays? How did you define the right balance to produce content at scale and choose the right partner for the right task? Maybe, I don't know if you could give us some examples of some assets that are being produced in-house versus those left with external partners, if any.
Sure. Hi. First of all, thank you for inviting me on the panel. It's great to be with my colleagues in the industry, and thanks for everybody who's tuned in to listen. At Barclays, it's obviously a service industry, but we do a huge range of asks and content requirements. Most of it's B2C, sometimes B2B, and the magnitude varies all the way from editing a self-shot talking head, and we've done a lot of that during lockdown because we couldn't go out with our crew or with our cameras, all the way up to full production in a studio involving actors shot over multiple days, or sometimes shot internationally when we're lucky enough to get the brief. Now, how we partner is that we have a range of approved production partners that we work with, and they've all been onboarded and audited and checked. And the great thing is that they all have a unique skill set. They can all do the same thing, but they've also their expertise in different things. So some have licensed drone operators, others have large green screens, others have access to videographers and runners and various skill sets like that. But we have a process by which we work with these companies, and it really depends on the budget, the complexity, and how the skills complement our own and how it suits the brief. Now, it's really important to note that across all the work that we do, we are the creatives and with these partners. And so it could be a series of freelancers or the production companies, but we initiate the concept and we partner with them to make sure that they see our vision. But it doesn't mean that we are the arbiters of creative. We also seek their creative input because they often have a fresh perspective, or they might see something in a different way that might improve the quality and the output at the end. But I would say that budget is often a key decider on scale and complexity. We have our own cameras and equipment. It just depends on our pipeline of production. If we can manage it and do it in-house, we'll do it in-house. I think the most important thing that happens at any production, whether it's an animation or a full full-scale promo is around the purpose of the project. We have that conversation very early on with the stakeholder. You know, what is it they want to achieve, and that really helps define the brief later on and the kind of the output. Clever cut through doesn't require the most complex execution. It could be the most simple animation that gets a really good return on investment and actually gets a lot of cut through with the product. So it's about messaging, connecting the right message with the right channel as well. Making a video that's about setting up a direct debit in your banking app is not going to require the same emotive process or the same execution as a piece about buying your first home or getting a mortgage or a loan. They're very different things, but they're kind of from the same genesis. In-house during pre-COVID times, we would often shoot and direct stuff in our building in and around London and across the UK. But whereas a more complex piece, such as recent life skills productions, needed the use of the larger scale studios over 6 days to block it out. So it just really depends on the brief and the complexity of the project.
Thank you very much, Remy. And I like what you said, going back to the purpose of the project, which actually resonates quite well with, as you're just being pragmatic and what's the objective first, and then deciding on, you know, a set of multiple criteria: budget, complexity, skills, capacity, which partner you want to use. Thank you. So there's no one size fits all. It's always you're going to have to assess and find, re-ask the same questions for each project. Thank you so much. Nikki?
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
So what have been your key observations? So you've been, so we've heard from Danone, we've heard from Barclays. Your position, actually, you've been on both sides of the fence. So what are your key observations on how marketing delivery models have evolved, and what type of models, maybe the most common ones, have you seen being put in place to content at scale?
Yeah, well, that's okay. Well, you know, I think everyone, both agency and brand, are having to, you know, evolve with this shift in consumer behavior, which, you know, as you've said, is going to be compounded with the coronavirus now, but consumers are predominantly online. So this challenge for brands of how do you show up in a consistent, engaging way across all of your touch points, not only makes consumers not only makes consumers want to interact with you, but that gives them this kind of consistent creative experience. And because of that, I think delivery strategy is having to play a much bigger part up front in the strategic and creative process, not just from a feasibility point of view, which I think historically is maybe where a lot of the focus has been, because obviously there is pressure to ensure that your budgets are being met and you're using the budget in a smart way, but actually from a possibilities point of view, because when you're thinking about the format as well as the ideas at conception, you know, not only does good stuff not get killed, but actually it can be built upon with ideas with the right specialists in the room. So where I think delivery has somewhat been overlooked in the past and maybe a bit unfairly perceived as the boring back end, it's now front and center of any marketing strategy. So what we're finding is everyone is having to embrace the complexity of the landscape and just lean in to collaboration, and whether or not that's tech or media or production, it's the key theme that keeps coming out. And it is proving a challenge because it's blurring the lines between, you know, what might be perceived as, you know, traditional or typical roles and responsibilities, because it's shifting this focus. So if, you know, creative thinking isn't the linear process that perhaps it's been in the past, you know, and also typically when you're delivering at scale, delivery models have tended to have more specialist silos so that you can deliver at speed. But what we're seeing is this much greater need for there to be more creative connective tissue between all these different parts to ensure that not only is that consumer getting that consistent experience, but that actually delivery teams have that creative framework in which they can kind of get on and deliver.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And I think you described quite well the need for agility. Because, yeah, the lines are being blurred and there's no one size fits all again, and you need to adapt and embrace the complexity of the landscape and just find the right solutions for your organization. Thank you so much. So I'd like now to talk about the collaborations amongst different partners. So I understand, as you and Rami, you're still working with in-house, obviously, and external partners, it's very rare to bring all capabilities in-house, so at least not all at once, which means, you know, you will still have to work with external agencies, which can create sometimes some sort of competition between the in-house resources and the external agencies, which also then would increase the inefficiencies amongst all partners if roles and responsibilities are not clear and sharing common goals. So as you're coming back to you, so to you, what are the key components of successful collaborations that would bring the best out of each partner you are working with? If you could just maybe just give us some insights on that, please.
No, that's, well, it's exactly as you said. No, it's a very, very delicate balance because everybody's in competition with everybody else. And it's all part of your ecosystem. So what you have to get is the best from what you want to invest, of course. I think the key is to be very precise as much as possible about who's doing what and why these people has to do what. In this way, you also have to have a very good internal management in order to, you know, connect all the pieces and make them play like a melody in a way or together, right? So I think the key is, and I know it sounds very old fashioned, but RESI is the key, the KPIs that you want to onboard, and as well the clear cut between one part of the job and the other. As I said you before, in Danone, we are really having this split into what is hero and what is DCO, social, or going on, you know, always on content. So for us, it's this is way to work. This is way that we decide to work, and so far it's working very well. Of course, both of the sides of the outsourcing and in-house would like to grab a little bit more of the job of the others. Of course, it's your role at the end to be in the middle and manage all of them, no? So it's more or less this at the end. It's the clarity of what you want to do and how you do it.
Thank you, Ezio. So visibility and clear communications on roles and responsibilities, that's what I noted. And Rami, so what are your views on the components for successful collaborations? How, you know, what's your recipe to avoid a potential disconnect between in-house and external resources? You said you're working with a range of approved production partners. How do you use, like, I don't know, specific KPIs or that are shared amongst all parties involved? Or if you could maybe tell us a bit about that, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the risk of repeating a lot of what Ezio said, I'm sure that's going to happen a lot today. I'll try and break it down into two bits. So the kind of components of successful collaboration, in my opinion, are there's quite a few. I mean, we're in the Video Lab, our kind of little world in the creative studio. We're in a unique position of acting as the in-house agency for our stakeholders, but also acting as clients to our external production partners. Now, both relationships require clear, open channels of communication, being accessible and building on a rapport that we've established over time with everyone involved in the creation and delivery, all the way from animation straight all the way through to above the line content. Now, being in a large corporate environment, there is a relatively high turnover of stakeholders. So they either move on or change jobs or go somewhere else. So it's really important to make sure that we are constantly refreshing these relationships with these stakeholders, their teams, really to get to the heart of their products and services that we are trying to promote together. There is a huge power in just getting up from your desk and walking over to a product owner or a stakeholder to really understand the ethos of what they're trying to sell or their new proposition face to face. Now, obviously, we haven't been able to do that since March, but in pre-COVID times, you know, there's a real strong value of being in-house and being able to do that. Now, it's also really important that we have clear and transparent and live relationships with our sign-off teams, so brand, legal, compliance. And just through experience, you learn how to preempt any kind of showstoppers that might stop your production or ruin the delivery pipeline. Now, our business is by its very nature risk averse. So this helps us guide the creative, not limiting the creative, but make sure make sure that the creative actually gets signed off and that we can deliver and everybody's happy. Now, on the other side of the equation, we wear a different hat, and that's with our external production partners and freelancers. Now, the attitude that I personally take with these working relationships is of a partnership, even though they are contracted to work out with us. We all want to make beautiful, cut through and engaging content as efficiently and as smoothly as possible, and we want to have a good time doing it. You know, being on set is fun. I personally like being on set because it's hard work, but it's enjoyable. Now, we understand that these partners have a profit margin, but we all have to work in unison. It's like an orchestra, like Ezio was saying. We all have to work together. There's a common vision, and we have to deliver to that common vision. So open, honest communication, working to realistic timelines. When things look like they're not going to plan, you have to flag this up as soon as possible. Open and honest dialogue. And then when you're doing your production timeline, factoring in healthy sign-off time, because often there are congestion periods during the summer, for example, when our legal team tends to be on holiday, and then making sure that in pre and post-production, we don't hold up any sign-off that ultimately affects the delivery to our stakeholder, because we want to exceed our stakeholders' expectations, make sure they're happy and they come back to us for more and more repeat business. So I've gone on, I'll try and speed through, but how do we avoid, I think, talking about potential disconnect between in-house and external resource. So we're always guided by brand guidelines, tone of voice, color palette, visual identity. And we understand through experience the rules and regulations. So for example, we don't show alcohol on screen. We avoid showing third-party brands. We don't work with children because it just requires more sign-off than working with adults. That's not to say that we don't keep an eye on current trends in the industry, in the creative industry, from film, from animation, from experiential. And we always look to kind of incorporate that into our work, but sticking within our brand guidelines. And how do we keep it fresh? I mean, something that I've been pushing and I've been supported by my boss is to kind of constantly enter work and benchmark it across the industry through awards. So for example, Cannes Dolphins and FCOM awards, and evangelizing our work to the wider marketing team. So we always do behind the scenes videos. We show like the process that goes into making a video. So there's hundreds of hours that funnels down to 30 seconds on TV or 30 seconds online. A lot of people don't really understand all of the work and the effort that goes into it, especially not because they're not aware. It's just because that's just not their world. They're experts in finance or financial products. And we're here to show them that, you know, this is all the effort and the complexity that goes into making this, and it helps kind of define briefs later on. It gets better briefs, basically. It's a cyclical process.
Thank you so much, Rami. I like what you said, that it's like an orchestra, and to deliver common goals, and but based on, you know, the importance. I like what you said as well, the importance of brand guidelines, and it's not because you have brand guidelines that you can take it for granted. You actually have to communicate around them and constantly refresh this sort of educational role as well that you're having, just re-explaining all the time, and making sure everyone is brought up to speed and following the same path towards a common goal. Thank you so much. Nikki, I'd like to, so we spoke about the collaborations. I'd like to talk about potentially, you know, the challenges, like how can it all go wrong? And again, for you, Nikki, having seen both sides of the fence, what are the common mistakes you've seen and would like to flag today with our audience so they keep this in mind when they try to race for agility?
Well, I think a big watch out is that any change of any kind of delivery model is commonly motivated by a kind of financial objective. And again, that's going to be compounded by the coronavirus. And I think that's just where we need a bit of caution, because immediately your focus and your headspace is in a place where you're looking to make savings rather than doing what you're actually doing, which is building something and making an investment for the future. And I think, you know, especially if it's an internal model, it's going to be, you know, the longest relationship that you're going to have. And I think you need to have a really clear framework and business plan for not just what you want it to do now, but a kind of really clear roadmap on how you want to see it evolving with your business. And I think there can be a tendency for not wanting to pay for or at least undervaluing the kind of operational side of a delivery model, particularly the people that aren't creating or producing the work. And I have to say that is my experience, both agency and brand side. My observation is that creative operations is still largely seen, sadly, as margin draining and not margin gaining, which I think is really tough, as I think creative operations is arguably probably under the most pressure to diversify and future-proof itself. So I think we've got to shift that perception if we're going to see these new delivery models really succeed and thrive. And with the greater need to look at the whole marketing ecosystem to really support and protect all these different functions, so that you can deliver consistency at scale, at speed, in autonomy. You have to invest in the creative operations of it. And Rami and Ezio have already mentioned the orchestra analogy. Well, if your marketing ecosystem is your orchestra, and as you're listening to this, only now you're only going to know how large or complex your company is, or how relatively simple, hard is the music that you're going to be playing. But creative operations is the conductor, and I don't mean that as a single person, although it can be. I mean it as a function. It's unthinkable that you'd have an orchestra without a conductor. So I think for me that's the kind of the common theme for both agency and brand, that you have to see, take your operations seriously.
Thank you, and I agree with you. If the in-house agencies are just mainly saving initiatives, I think it's even a risk before you even begin. So again, this is important watch out. Thank you so much, Rami. So we have 4 minutes left. I have 3 questions, so we'll have to be very precise. So Rami, so what challenges, based on what Nikki just said, what challenges are there any that resonate with you, and what challenges have you faced when trying to maintain the role as brand guardian, sorry, excuse my French, brand guardian when working with multiple external partners? Anything you'd like to share?
I mean, there's always challenges, and I'll be super quick. I mean, with animation, it's much easier to enforce consistency because we have a clear set of guidelines for styling and color and how to represent human figures. But I would say also within these parameters, I actively encourage creativity. Animation has taken off massively this year because of the 2 lockdowns, and I personally think next year it's going to continue on that rise. So all brands should definitely be looking towards streamlining their production for animation or bringing more animators in-house. I would say in theory, it's harder to ensure consistency with live action, but how we minimize any discrepancies by keeping brand involved during the whole process, from concepting through to storyboarding, all the way through to picture lock and the first edit. But we also ensure consistency by being active and partnering closely with our production partners. So I act as co-director on a lot of the shoots, and we sit in the edit suite as well to streamline the production, but to make sure that we're both working towards the same vision as smoothly and as quickly as possible. That's not to say things don't go wrong, but I guess it's how you react to them going wrong and how quickly you react to them going wrong is the key.
Thank you. Agility again. We got a question in the chat box. I'm sorry, we probably won't have time to take it, but I think the team at Amnet and Entourage will follow up with you, Rory. The last part I'd like to quickly discuss is the evolution of marketing models, and maybe Nikki, how do you see the in-house model developing in the coming years, and what do you think the impact will be on how brands work with outsourced partners?
I think they will continue to bring services in closer, so that they have more control over that consistency of their communications, and and that work is typically always on, or stuff that you can respond to quickly, or that needs reviewing on a consistent basis, and then the output that you can turn on and off, or that you're not quite sure maybe how much you need or when. It makes kind of more sense to outsource. But I think what that is going to be dependent on the role of your in-house function and whether or not it's a strategic function or whether or not it's a service function. And you need that clarity so that you then have a very clear understanding of the benefits and values of outsourcing. But I think the role that agencies are going to play in the future is going to be most interesting, as I think they will have to evolve with the changing need and prove that they can be business partners and solve business problems with their clients, and not just drive kind of brand desire and creative good work. And I think it's going to be tricky for them, because I think historically delivery and production has perhaps been where a large part of their margin has been made, and strategy and creative has perhaps been a bit of a victim of the squeeze on fees over the years. So I think they're going to have to relook at not only their value, but the role that they are now playing in this marketing ecosystem, and then embrace it. And you know, because of that, I think creative is going to be a much more shared responsibility between in-house and agency moving forward.
Thanks so much. Right, so we're running after time. Let's just wrap up. Maybe if each of you could maybe share in one sentence, you know, the one thing you'd like the audience to remember on how to drive efficiencies without compromising quality of speed. Rami, let's start with you. One sentence.
I'm on mute. Okay. There is really no substitute for having the experience of working with teams, the relationships and the experiences that you build with them. So you get to know how they work, how to get the best out of each other. We have absolutes in a bank that we must adhere to. So because we work in such a heavily regulated industry, I think being preemptive, knowing from experience what works, what doesn't, what will get signed off, what won't get signed off, massively speeds up the production process and cuts down on wasted time and resource. When it comes to animation, be smart, reuse digital assets. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. But I would say going back to evangelizing, sharing how we make stuff is critically important because it helps subconsciously shape stakeholders' minds. And also having insightful conversations with stakeholders before they officially brief us. So it really helps us get to the heart of what they're trying to do. Not every PowerPoint needs to be an animation. So it's just kind of working out what really needs to be sold is the most important thing, I would say.
Thank you so much. It's you.
I will be very quick. No, I think it's, you know, the risk when you go into the details, what you have to do, mix the model, maybe sometimes you lose why you're doing this. And you're doing this to have a proper customer experience, proper customer journey. So this is the key point. Focus on that. All the rest become a consequence of what you wanted to do. And it's very interesting what the guy said. It's true about animation. It's true about smart production, offshoring for small editing, and so on. It's just don't see this from a saving perspective. And I'm telling you from a procurement side, don't see this. You might end up spending more. What you have to measure are other parameters: time to market, quantity and quality of the content that you produce. Quantity is easy. Quality you can measure, for instance, by the percentage of the internal approved content that you go on air with. You know, all these things. And the very last thing, if you work with in-housing guys, allow them to have their own developing program, because this is very critical in order not to be stuck into your brand, but having a broader vision on the market, which will pay off then at the end.
Thanks so much, Ezio. Luckily, we're recording because I see people dropping off, so hopefully they'll be able to just play back the end. Nikki, what would be your top advice before I just hand over back to Anil and the team?
That's right. I'm going to make it very quick. Clarity of roles, clear ways of working, and a stronger connective tissue between strategy and conception and production and delivery. Done.
Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anil and the team at Entourage and Mnet for giving us a bit of time to discuss that. As you can see, we could talk about it for like hours or days. So hopefully that was quite insightful for the audience. And yeah, thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. I mean, with such a wonderful selection of speakers, an hour was never, ever going to be enough time, let's face it. So we'll have to organise a follow-up. But yeah, just to close off, Laura, Ezio, Nikki, Rami, thank you so much for the insight. Really, really great to hear your thoughts. Time's obviously up. So another big thank you to all of our speakers, Dave Pritchard, David Bevis, and Amnet as well for hosting today's event. And thank you, most importantly, to everyone who joined today and was able to sort of share in the insight. If there are any questions, please do follow up via the We Are Amnet website, and we'll ensure that the speakers get them and we can follow up accordingly. But until next time, thanks everyone, really insightful, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Thanks. Cheers.